Late in 2021, like many other people on the planet, I was struck by a photograph taken from space of a mountain of discarded clothing dumped in Chile's Atacama Desert. I remember thinking, this is fundamentally wrong, on all levels. I also remember thinking, in the Atacama, those clothes could still be there in a couple of hundred years' time. At the time, there was a lot of finger-pointing. Was it the brands, the consumers, the exporters, the influencers, the marketers, the retailers, or the luxury labels? Or maybe COVID that left those items unsold? And how, of all things, did they end up in the Atacama Desert? But the thought I couldn't shake off was this. Someone had to have paid for that overproduction. So let's look at the maths. As a former brand marketer, I know fashion can be an emotional purchase, but for just a few minutes, let's strip away the emotion and look at the numbers. Since the year 2000, the world's population has grown by about 28%, nearly 2 billion more people. But in the same time, clothing consumption has surged by nearly 95%. We're consuming fashion more than 3 times faster than population growth. At the most basic level, humans need clothes. That's our starting point, need. On top of that comes what we choose to buy, that's want, and beyond that is what the industry makes, that's production. The real issue is that the relationship between these three has a compounding multiplier effect. Start with need, multiply by what we want, that's overshoot, multiply again by what's produced, and that's overshoot squared. It's amplified waste through compounding percentages. That's why the problem is blowing up so fast. Every year the world produces around 100 billion garments, but we only buy around 80 billion. That's a 25% oversupply, production running well ahead of demand. Here in Australia, retail insiders admit they routinely order 30% buffer for extra stock, knowing that some of it will never sell. Overproduction isn't an accident, it's baked into the business model. Retailers will say they need a buffer because they can't predict which styles will be the season's hot sellers and which will sit on the shelf. So they deliberately overorder as insurance, preferring to have excess stock they can discount or dump rather than risk missing sales. As Vogue UK reported, to sell out of a product actually costs a business more than having extra product that you end up discounting. But stay with me here, because the math says you can have your cake and eat it too. And here's my real point. All of this overproduction is being paid for. If it wasn't, these companies wouldn't still be in business, let alone posting growth year after year. The costs of overproduction are simply baked into the price tags. Every $100 a consumer pays for an item, a portion of that goes towards paying for clothes that will never leave the shelf. They're already footing the bill for unsold garments, whether they realise it or not. As the British environmental journalist Lucy Siegel famously put it, fast fashion is not free. Someone somewhere is paying the price. Coming back to the math of compounding percentages. Of the 80 billion garments we do buy globally, about 30% are never worn. That's 24 billion items with tags still on and are never worn. So we only need 56 billion, but we produce 100 billion. That's a true overproduction of nearly 80%. And then there's the price myth. Take a polyester sports shirt. It weighs about 250 grams. Virgin polyester costs about $1.50 a kilo US, making that fibre in that shirt worth just 37 cents. Recycled polyester costs about $3.50 a kilo US, which raises that fibre value to 87 cents. The difference, 50 cents on a $100 shirt. That's just half of 1% of the retail price. Even if you doubled the cost of recycled polyester, which may well be necessary for recyclers to stay in business as they're going out of business at a record rate, the fabric would only add about $1 more to a $100 garment. That's just 1%. But again, here's the thing. That extra 1% is already baked into the cake because consumers are already paying for that overproduction. So when the industry says recycling is too expensive, the math says otherwise. It isn't too expensive. It's just too inconvenient for a system hooked on high margins and endless growth. A system that's failed to publicly acknowledge that the consumer is already paying for the overproduction. And of course they know it. It's a line item in their P&L. Overproduction isn't an accident. It's accounted for. I know many smart minds are working on solutions worldwide. Industry bodies are driving extended producer responsibility, better collection systems and circular models. Brands are building AI forecasting to curb over-ordering, designing for durability and recyclability, and adding digital IDs for traceability. And in the end, I think we'll need it all. But I want to add my 5 cents worth. I keep coming back to 2 things, the math and the point that someone has paid for the overproduction, which is why I believe the solution is in the math right in front of us. If retailers can afford to build in a 30% buffer of overproduction and pass that cost straight to the consumers, then trimming that buffer to say 20% would free up the cost of 10% of overproduction. And remember, 10% less production isn't just fabric savings. Every unsold garment also carries the cost of labels and trims, packaging and shipping, warehousing and retail handling, and eventually disposal. All of those costs vanish when overproduction is reduced. That's more than enough to cover the small premium of recycling. The money is already in the system. The consumers are already paying for it. Redirecting it to proper recycling and product stewardship wouldn't cost shoppers a cent more. The fashion industry doesn't lack resources. It lacks a meaningful purpose beyond profit. And without that, more regulation is inevitable. So let's take the baked-in business model of overproduction, cut the slices a little differently, and leave something on the plate for end-of-life recycling. The cake has already been paid for. It's just about serving it up more responsibly. And you may ask the legitimate question, well, Geoff, who's going to make this happen? The answer is, and always has been, regulation. Yes, we really do need fashion police. I know governments want industry to regulate themselves, but this industry is out of control. It must be reined in. No other industry polluting the planet at such an uncontrolled and ever-increasing rate is going unrestrained. Here's something to think about. Fashion's emissions will soon exceed those of all of road transportation. Worse, while road transport emissions are set to peak this year, fashion emissions are on track to double by 2030 if nothing changes. If we let that happen, then Lucy Siegel called it correctly. We have all paid the price. This episode was inspired by a post by Dr. Tom Vogue from Brussels, which was reposted and commented on by Edo Levin from Germany, and then shared further by Adrian Jones of BlockTex from Queensland. Proof that the power of LinkedIn to spark important conversation. Thank you.